Welcome to your Canadiens Connection on Rocket Sports Radio. We are proud to be the trusted source for all things Habs for more than a decade. This is the Canadiens Connection Podcast. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Canadiens Connection Podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio, where we keep you informed, engaged, and entertained, and we focus all on the Montreal Canadiens. So if you're a fan of the Habs, then you have found the right place for yourself. My name is Amy Johnson. I'm going to be your host for today's show for episode 338 of the Canadiens Connection Podcast. And as happens every week, I am very pleased to be joined in the studio by my co-host, who happens to be the founder and president of Rocket Sports. His name is Rick Stevens, and he's here with me once again today. Rick, how you doing?
I'm grumpy.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I mean...
Why are you grumpy?
Well, we talked about NFL trades in the pre-show. And you brought up Aaron Rodgers and possibly being a backup for the Vikings for Minnesota.
You needed to start bracing yourself in case it happens.
Got all those Brett Favre flashbacks from years ago.
That's terrible.
No, we just got to think positive. JJ McCarthy. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say you were just grumpy because Kent Hughes just kind of slept in.
Yeah, that kind of was on the Montreal side this week. But no, that's what we are going to focus. Talk about trades. We're going to focus on the NFL or the NHL trade deadline and whether what did Kent Hughes do? Well, did he make the right call? Did he not make the right call? Why did he make the call he did? We're talking about all of that today.
We are. Before we get there, let's just give you a quick rundown of what you can expect on today's show. As we do each and every week, the very first segment of the show is dedicated to all the news kind of wrapped up for the last week. So that's brief recaps of Canadiens games that took place over the last week, a roster update, an injury update for the Habs as well. We'll take a quick peek at the Habs prospects, give you some highlights as to what's happening there, and then we'll give you some general news from around the NHL. Obviously, this week we are going to talk a bit about some of the blockbuster trades that did go down with the GMs who were pretty busy on the phone. All of that is in segment number one. Until then, we then get to the second segment, which is our big topic of the week. And this week, Hughes presses pause on the Habs rebuild and prioritizes a playoff push. We're going to look at whether or not Kent Hughes holding the line and not buying or selling. What was the context around that? What's the consequence of that? Is it the right call? Was it the right thing to do? We're going to examine all of that. What could he have done instead? We're going to kind of summarize. It may sound silly. We're going to summarize everything Kent Hughes didn't do, but that's what we're going to do today and kind of look at what that means going forward for the Montreal Canadiens. And then finally, of course, in our third segment, it's where we get to let you have your say, and we will be reading for you our best responses to last week's question of the week. We ask all of our listeners and viewers a fan and viewer question of the week, the Canadiens Connection question of the week, and we invite you to send in your responses. We pick the best ones out that we receive, and we read them out for everyone to hear next week on the show, because maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. It's a great conversation starter. So we've got some great responses to last week's question of the week. With that in mind, this is an interactive podcast. We'd love to hear from you, whether you have a question, a comment, or an answer to the Canadiens Connection question of the week. So the best ways for you to reach out and interact with us is, first and foremost, send us a text on the Rocket Sports text line. You can do that by sending a text to 585-3ROCKET. Again, that's 585-3ROCKET. You can also send us an email, hello@rocketsportsmedia.com. You can leave a comment on our YouTube channel. If you're new and you're not sure where to find our YouTube channel, just go to InsideTheCanadiens.com. It'll take you right to our YouTube channel, or you can do it the old-fashioned way on social media at Habs Connection on Twitter, X, Facebook, and Instagram. So let's just take a look at what has happened since last week. The Canadiens playing 3 games, kicking things off with, remember, it was a home and home against the Buffalo Sabres Saturday night and Monday night. Starting in Buffalo on Saturday, Montreal coming out with a 4-2 victory over the Buffalo Sabres that night. Great night for Mr. Jakub Dobeš, who finally got his first start in about 3 weeks, getting the win.
Yeah, it was a good start. Good win, good road win for Jakub Dobeš. 2-point games from Lane Hutson, a 2-point game from Christian Dvorak as well, who's been playing pretty well, and not just with respect to faceoffs. So yeah, it was a good road win for the team and setting up for Monday night at the Bell Center.
Monday night at the Bell Center, I will just make a quick comment. Was very pleased to see that in Buffalo on Saturday night, anthems went off without a hitch. Was disappointed to once again see that on Monday night in Montreal, the Bell Center fans chose to boisterously boo the U.S. anthem once again. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Montreal did, Buffalo kind of came a little more prepared on Monday night's game and took Montreal to overtime. It was Montreal's 5th straight victory, but they required extra minutes to get there, winning 4-3 over the Sabres in extra time.
An odd game for the Canadiens in that they did not score a 5-on-5 goal. Power play goal, shorthanded goal, the overtime winner, 3-on-3, obviously. So no 5-on-5 goal for Montreal. And they allowed, after taking a lead, they allowed the Sabres to score 3 times consecutively to get back in the game, but still picked up the 2 points at home for their 5th straight win.
Then the Habs took to the West Coast, basically, starting their Western road trip out in Edmonton on Thursday night. This was another game that required extra time. And this time it was Edmonton coming out on top 3-2 with an overtime victory.
Bouchard scored with 6.9 seconds left in overtime. Crossing route at the blue line, Yuri Slafkovsky got a little confused and lost his guy. That was Evan Bouchard. Bouchard gives Edmonton the win in overtime. Still 5 points for the Canadiens in the last 3 games. They earning the point in Edmonton. Cole Caulfield scored for the 4th consecutive game. He's a 30 goal scorer, now 31 goals on the season. And Lane Hutson has made it to the 50-point milestone in the fewest games by a Canadian defenseman. So remarkable rookie season for Lane Hutson.
Absolutely. Congratulations to him. That leaves, after 62 games, the Canadiens with a record of 30-26-6. That's good enough for 66 points, putting them 6th in the Atlantic Division, 20th overall in the NHL. And so they've crept up a little bit with the chance of making the playoffs, which, I mean, seems to be such a focus this last week, and particularly with the trade deadline, with a 16.1% chance of making the playoffs.
Fans talking about playoffs, players talking about playoffs, the general manager considering a playoff run here, and all that because the Canadiens have an 84% chance of missing the playoffs. They're on pace for an 86-point season. And part of the, I guess, enthusiasm is their strength of schedule. Detroit's got a tough last 20 games. The Canadiens do not. The 10th easiest. They're 22nd in terms of strength of schedule. So 10th easiest schedule down the stretch. And they are now have the 14th best odds of winning the draft lottery.
All right. Well, as far as the roster was concerned this week, not a whole lot in terms of things that are new, but Nick Suzuki was announced as the Molson Cup winner for the month of February.
Indeed, and he was presented with that Molson Cup win for February on Monday night, the game against Buffalo. And at the same time, the NHL announced that Suzuki was named the third star for the NHL. He had registered 7 points in 3 games, coming just behind Roope Hintz, second star, and Andrei Vasilevsky, first star in the NHL for the week.
Nice. The big news, of course, this week was that the Canadiens would not be dealing Jake Evans at the deadline because they signed him to a 4-year contract extension that runs through the 28-29 season, paying him $2.85 million on average per year, which obviously is very team friendly. Had he tested the open market, Jake Evans probably would have landed a bigger paying deal than that.
Yeah, clear that Evans left money on the table. Had he gone to market on July 1st, there was all kinds of speculation, but I think the low number was $3.5 million a season, in that range, up to $4 million. So he as I said, left money on the table. It was Kent Hughes that for some reason, interestingly enough, played hardball with Jake Evans. And it was reported that Hughes basically stuck to the number that he offered. And it was Evans, after the two sides not talking for a great length of time, weeks. Remember, it was reported that the two sides were pretty far apart on their numbers. It was Evans that reignited the conversations through his agent on Sunday, and he decided that staying in Montreal was more important than, to use his terms, chasing dollars. So it basically accepted the Canadiens' offer.
Absolutely. And he actually spoke to the media about it, saying that he was very happy to just simply stay in Montreal.
Yeah, it's obviously a special place to me, and things got pretty real the last few weeks, and you started to realize that you got a great thing going here, great teammates, great staff, just everything about it, the whole city, the fans is great, and for me it was tough to see myself leaving.
Yeah, he as it became real to him, he decided that there was things that were more important. His happiness was important. Last summer he got married, and so it was important for he and his wife to stay in Montreal. Liked everything about Montreal, liked the fans, liked playing in Montreal. Like the staff, teammates. He said the only thing he didn't like was weather and taxes, but that wasn't very important in the scheme of things.
Well, as you can imagine, it's been kind of a roller coaster last few months for him. And somebody actually asked him, how have things been for you over the last 2 months?
Fun, yeah. Yeah, you guys were all tweeting about me, so... it was okay. It's a lot of rumors going around, a lot of stuff where you might end up. My wife and I have been chatting about it a bunch, and it was tough. Our whole apartment was packed up, honestly, the last 2 days, and we were ready to, go somewhere else. But our hearts were always here, and we wanted to stay in Montreal.
So they had packed up the entire apartment. Jake Evans had planned to take 3 suitcases on the road because figured he would be away from home for a good length of time. But all of that was for naught as he stayed in Montreal. An interesting tidbit was that this wasn't unusual. Packing up as it got near the end of the season wasn't unusual, that they have been packing up at the end of every season. They rent furnished apartments each year and just use them for the time that during the season, pack everything up, And so now he said that he thinks he's earned the right to some stability in his life, that they're probably going to look for a bigger place. They're probably going to look for their own house and
Their own furniture.
and their own furniture. Absolutely. And he just found it, as he said, it got real. He found it tough to see himself leaving Montreal.
One other piece of news about the roster, which was a welcome sight for a lot of people, was the fact that Caden Gooley skated on his own at Brassard on Friday.
Yeah, that was great to see. It's hard to know if he's on track or not because it was, the Canadiens really at when the injury happened, it wasn't clear how long he would be out, if it was season-ending injury, if he was able to be back. We talked to Dr. Morris, who said this is not, this is different. This is a different kind of injury, and because of the position it was in, it could take some time. But he was skating, and he was his skating stride was deliberate. It was controlled exercises, but just seeing him on the ice by himself in Brassard was great news.
Absolutely. Let's now switch gears. We will take a quick peek in on the Habs prospects.
It's time for the Rocket Report. The Rocket Sports Media Team is your premier source for information about the Laval Rocket, the AHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens, as well as Habs prospects playing in the CHL, NCAA, and leagues around the world.
We're going to start with one prospect in particular for this week, and one that we don't always we haven't talked about frequently enough, and that's certainly more than enough reason to take a peek on how he's doing. And that is Tyler Thorpe, who this week scored his 26th goal of the season playing for the Vancouver Giants in the WHL.
Yeah, and if that's not enough reason to talk about Tyler Thorpe, he did that. Well, they were wearing special. The Vancouver Giants were wearing special jerseys that particular night, and they were Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle uniforms.
We talk about how this is a common thing in the ECHL, and I know junior teams do this as well.
The WHL. So
the specialty uniform nights are very popular with ECHL teams. Apparently, the Vancouver Giants decided they were going to have a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle night, and it is. I'm sorry, but they look ridiculous.
But his goal was
his
tremendous.
Goal was beautiful.
I mean,
what he's wearing is not.
Yeah. Tyler Thorpe, he was chosen at last year's draft, 5th round pick, 130th overall by the Canadiens. And a guy who has size, 6'5", 215, and a great shot, and showed great hands on this particular goal. And he's having an excellent season, 26 goals, 23 assists, 49 points in 61 games. Yeah, the outfit left a little to be desired.
A little bit. But congratulations to Tyler Thorpe. Keep that up, young man. Keep that up. Laval has been kind of full steam ahead themselves, reclaiming that first overall in the AHL top spot. They beat Belleville 4-1, went on to beat Utica 5-1 in a game that allowed them to become the first team in the AHL this season to hit the 35 win mark. That was also the game that David Reinbacher scored his first goal of the season after returning from injury, which is great news as well. And then just last night, Friday night, a little bit of a tighter game. They were actually down for a significant period of time through 2 periods to the Rochester Americans, battling for top spot in the division. They were down 2-0 for a little while, then 2-1 for a while, and then 3 really quick goals in the span of, a minute and a half, 2 minutes in the third period, put them up 4-3 over Rochester, allowing them to take that first position overall in the North Division, first overall in the AHL. and they're just cruising right along.
Yeah, that's the two best teams, not only in the division, but in the AHL are Rochester and Laval, and Laval has the edge with another game to come
This
Saturday afternoon.
That's right. Trois-Rivières also doing quite well, despite the fact that they dropped a 3-1 decision to Norfolk earlier this week. They then turned around and beat them 7-0 the very next day, and then beat Worcester 3-1 later in the week. So the Trois-Rivières Lions, the ECHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens, they are first overall in the ECHL. So
When's
both
the last time that happened?
Yeah, both of the farm teams for the Montreal Canadiens are in the top spot in their respective leagues. That's pretty impressive. So let's get to the trade deadline in terms of the rest of the NHL before we tackle Kent Hughes and the Montreal Canadiens. It started overnight, Thursday night. If you were up late, which I wasn't,
I was.
then you didn't know. If you were, Elliot
Yeah.
Friedman was. If you were up late, then the rumblings started. And it took most of the night, it took all night and most of the rest of the day on Friday to get it done. But yes, the Dallas Stars acquiring Mikko Rantanen from the Carolina Hurricanes in exchange for center Logan Stankoven and 2 first-round picks in 2026 and 2027, along with third-round picks in both of those years as well. But that wasn't even enough. Just the trade wasn't big enough news.
Yeah, and part of the delay, I guess, and someone had tweeted, I can't give credit but this was the first pajama party trade deadline is what they said.
Yeah.
What took overnight was negotiating a contract for Rantanen, but the Stars signed him to an 8-year contract at $12 million cap hit and a no move clause as well, a full no move. So the rich get richer. Dallas already, a pretty strong Stanley Cup contender, and they kind of rocketed to the top in terms of the betting markets for being the favorite, the Stanley Cup favorite, come this spring.
Dallas and Colorado could play each other in the opening round.
Yeah, that's insane.
Which would be insane.
Do something about that, Gary.
Yeah.
Do something about that. Go back to the 1-8-2-7.
Yeah, I agree. Speaking of Colorado, the Avalanche pulled off something big on Thursday night themselves, acquiring Brock Nelson and William Dufour from the New York Islanders for prospect Cal Ritchie, defenseman Oliver Kylington, and a first-round pick in either 2026 or 2027, along with a 2028 third-rounder.
Prices were insane.
Yeah.
The Islanders got a huge haul for Brock Nelson, and nice to be a seller on this trade deadline. What the Avalanche have done and just kind of completely overhauling their entire roster, including their goalie department this season, amazing, absolutely amazing. And for them to lose Rantanen and still be, talked about as a Stanley Cup challenger is really quite remarkable.
Ottawa Senators not sitting back. They did what Montreal was sniffing around at trying to do, perhaps. They acquired center Dylan Cousins, defenseman Dennis Gilbert, and a 2026 second rounder from the Buffalo Sabres. And what did they give up for it? Well, center Josh Norris and defenseman Jacob Bernard Docker.
Brady Tkachuk pretty upset about this trade.
Yeah,
he
very
was
emotional.
Very
Yeah.
emotional. It's a risk, but one the Senators wanted to take to bring in underachieving Dylan Cousins, but a player with a lot of potential. Again, big prices paid on trade deadline day, and as you said, this is someone that there had been reports that the Canadiens had nothing got serious, but they were sniffing around with respect to Cousins as an answer to their second line center slot.
Now, we know every year at the trade deadline that 3 o'clock Eastern time comes, and we know to just hold your breath for a minute, because as long as a trade call got into the queue with Central Registry, it would still take a little bit of time to go through. And so trades trickle in after the 3:00 deadline, but those are trades that just took time to get through Central Registry, but had made the 3:00 deadline. Well, this year there was a ton of that happening. There was a big queue apparently at Central Registry at the 3:00 deadline, and out of left field, all of a sudden, Elliot Friedman, yes, the Florida Panthers are getting Brad Marchand. And Twitter melted down. I think I could hear practically every Bruins fan jumping into Boston Harbor from Pennsylvania. Florida Panthers, yes, acquired Brad Marchand from the Bruins. I can't even. Matt Tkachuk, Brad Marchand, and Sam Bennett on a line. No thank. I'm sorry for whoever has to face that. But for me, all that Boston got back for Brett, their captain, the last piece of that kind of legacy from 13, 14 years ago, a conditional 2027 second rounder.
Yeah, and I guess a couple of reasons for that, in that Marchand is injured, was ailing after the Four Seasons, the Four Nations tournament.
It's a very different tournament.
Yeah, and there was talk that Marchand wasn't happy with the way that negotiations were going in Boston for an extension. So. Good, I get. Boy, I hate to say anything nice about Brad Marchand, but yeah, it would be like if Brendan Gallagher was traded somewhere else. It would be hard to fathom, for sure.
Boston and Florida play each other on Tuesday. That's almost must see TV. Might have to. The Habs play very late on Tuesday.
That's true.
So we can all take advantage and at least peek into the first period of that game, because I think that's going to be, all eyes are going to be on that. Very, very, very interesting. Another Canadiens connection, not a trade, but a contract extension for the New Jersey Devils with Jonathan Kovacevic. Signing a 5-year contract extension with the Devils.
This is kind of one of those that got away. Kovacevic signed 5-year, $20 million contract extension with the New Jersey Devils, was deemed expendable by Kent Hughes and traded. It's tough to see. He's had a great season in New Jersey. Sheldon Keefe, he said that where's the quote? He and Jonas Siegenthaler have been a tremendous pair for us and a big part of our team's success for the early going of the season. So it's great to see his growth. He's a mainstay in that lineup for a team who's better than the Montreal Canadiens, or at least further on. Maybe that right shot defenseman who the Canadiens could have used this season. More so than a David Savard.
Absolutely. Finally, if you're looking for one more Canadiens connection, what does a trade with Utah have to do? Well, Utah Hockey Club traded Shea Weber's contract. Yes, his contract is still hanging around out there. Trading Shea Weber's contract and a 2026 fifth-round pick to the Chicago Blackhawks in exchange for defenseman Victor Soderstrom and right-wing prospect Aku Rati. Boy, Shea Weber is just making the rounds.
Yeah,
even though he's not playing.
He should be sure to get a jersey from each of these stops, or at least his places where his contract has stopped. It's since the injury and since it was clear that he wasn't coming back, it's the third time that Weber's contract has been traded, and the final year of his deal.
My goodness. It's amazing. All right. So yes, there were other trades that took place. We're not going to go through each and every one, but these were the big ones, or the ones that had a connection to the Montreal Canadiens. It was a fascinating day, a fascinating week. But the Montreal Canadiens themselves, as Rick played at the beginning of the show, it was crickets. Kent Hughes not doing a single thing for this trade deadline, not buying, not selling. The only thing that happened was the Jake Evans contract extension. So we are going to take our first break here on the Canadiens Connection podcast. And when we come back, we are going to take a deep dive on the aftermath of a bout of silence from the Montreal Canadiens camp on trade deadline day and discuss what could have happened, what didn't happen, and where that takes the Montreal Canadiens from this point on. You are not going to want to miss it. So stay with us. You are listening to the Montreal Canadiens, to the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio.
It might not feel like it, but spring is right around the corner. Do you know how you can tell? Golfers are hitting the links, and we have some tournaments to talk about. And if you want to do more than just talk, well, put your money where your mouth is. Get in on all the tee to green action with DraftKings Sportsbook. From Thursday's opening round through the closing round on Sunday, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with tournament props, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Now, if you've never bet on golf before, it's easier than you think. Just pick something simple like a golfer to win the tourney and make your pick. It's just that easy. And here's something special for first-timers. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas, 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. New customers only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
And welcome back to the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio. One more time, my name is Amy Johnson. You can find me if you'd like to follow me on social media. You can find me on X at FlyersRule. And with me in the studio is, of course, our president and founder here at Rocket Sports. His name's Rick Stevens. You'll definitely want to follow him on X at Rocket Sports. It's where you get all of our Montreal Canadiens updates, all of the links to the podcast, all of the links to our YouTube videos when they come out, all of the links to any of our written content courtesy of Rick and Chris G, whether that's at Hockey Buzz or on our Substack. It's just the central place that you want to go. Be sure to follow at Rocket Sports on X. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. If this is one of your first times listening and you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, don't even think another minute about it. Just tap the subscribe button. Don't ever miss an episode. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel over at InsideTheCanadiens.com. All right, so, we've been debating here on the show. Habs fans have been debating. The Montreal media has been debating the question for weeks now. Would the Canadiens be buyers or sellers at the NHL trade deadline? And now that the deadline has come and gone, we all know that the Habs general manager decided to take a big old pass. Crickets. How about buyer, seller? How about nothing? Hughes decided to basically sit on the sidelines on Friday. Didn't take advantage of all of the rewards that were out there to be had for people who were selling. Didn't take advantage of any opportunities to upgrade his roster, maybe fill in that second line center position where Kirby Dach is obviously not going to be occupying for the rest of the season. And so today we really want to ask the question, was this the right move? We're going to break down the whole trade deadline for the Montreal Canadiens, try to figure out why Kent Hughes and company chose to go down the path that they did. And I think we're going to start by just hearing from the man himself, his press conference at 20 after 3 on Friday afternoon, I think everyone was anxious to hear what he would have to say after the Montreal Canadiens did absolutely nothing at the trade deadline. And he boiled it down to, okay, well, there was a choice, and you had to deal with the temptation to add a player or the temptation to sell players. And this was kind of his reasoning for all of that.
We believe we're progressing, but we're far from sitting here today saying our work is done, that we've built a team that we believe can compete on a consistent basis, night in, night out, for season in, season out for a Stanley Cup. So, as long as we keep that in mind, Eric, it probably helps you resist the excitement or the emotion of a team getting on a 5-game run. So we looked at it. This was a seller's market this year. I mean, there's so many teams that are tight to the playoffs like us that did very little in terms of selling off. As a result, the prices were high, and so on the one end, when you have expiring contracts, there is that temptation to get great value. On the flip side, if you were a buyer, you knew you were paying a pretty steep price to get into something that might help around the edges. And quite frankly, this group of players have gotten the team to this point in the standings.
So, he covered all the bases there, and said, to recap, it was a seller's market. The prices were very high, and there was potential to get great value for your pending unrestricted free agents. He said that, on the other hand, prices were so high that it wasn't, there was a temptation to reward the team and add some pieces either around the edges or beyond. But the realization is that a 5-game winning streak is a pretty short snapshot, and that the Canadiens are not in the position of being a Stanley Cup contender. They're not at that point of where they've used the term before, where they're having sustainable success. So the pull wasn't great enough in either direction to do anything, and that's his explanation for kind of pressing pause. Partly rewarding the team for the position they're in now. The position they're in is 22nd, 20th in the NHL, but that's an improvement. He talked about progression. That's an improvement over where they've been in the past, being in the bottom 5 and kind of playing for a good draft position.
And if there's one person who was obviously perfectly happy with how the trade deadline went down for Montreal, it was Captain Nick Suzuki, who was very, very quick to respond to the fact that watching teammates get dealt at the trade deadline has not been fun, hasn't been a fun experience in the past, and that he was glad that didn't happen this time around.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I've hated trading all these, teammates and good players for the last few years. It's definitely a nice and refreshing. I mean, we have a lot of belief in the group, and I think just the guys that were, rumored to be traded, got a weight lifted off their shoulders, and I think that's going to allow them to, play a little more free and make our team better too.
He was just really disappointed in past years seeing guys moved, seeing teammates moved, players that he liked, and he called it refreshing, the fact that that they weren't moved at the trade deadline. But you have to believe that for the most part, the evaluation that the hockey ops staff did was done prior to the February break, and they were on a losing streak at that point. and maybe it was adjusted that after the 5-game window, the 5-game winning streak, after pleas from Nick Suzuki and from the head coach, maybe the plan was moderated slightly because that temptation had to be really great, given that it was, clearly a seller's market. We talked about the hauls that sellers brought in. Prices were very high. Hughes confirmed that. But it also kept Hughes away from, the reports were that they, the names like Trevor Zegras, who keeps coming back up, and Dylan Cousins, that they showed some mild interest in. They just, because of the state of the trade deadline, they really never got close.
And I understand Nick Suzuki's sentiments there. I mean, we saw very raw emotion, as you alluded to in the first segment, from Brady Tkachuk when the news came down that Josh Norris, his very, very good friend, they've gone through the U.S. development program together. They are very close. When his very good friend got traded to Buffalo on Friday, Brady Tkachuk could barely talk about it. He was exceptionally emotional. So we certainly understand that personal relationship and human side of the trade deadline. And I certainly understand why Nick Suzuki would feel the way that he does. But we also have to remember that hockey is a business, and feelings are going to get hurt sometimes in the business side of hockey. And so just making sure everybody feels good is not, for me, in my opinion, is not enough of a reason to keep the status quo, particularly when you've got some expiring contracts that were garnering some interest, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But first, let's go back to Kent Hughes again, because he had plenty to say in his press conference, talking about how approaching the trade deadline has to be a balancing act.
But it's the management, the negotiation, the everyday negotiation in this, in my position here as a general manager, you want to win a Stanley Cup. I didn't come here to just do it. I would like to win. So on one end, there's the patience on the front end of it all, where there aren't a lot of wins. And then on the other end of it is it's not going so far the other way that all you're concerned about is building this team in the future without regard to what you're doing today. Because along the way, the relationships that you have with people, the ability to consider their point of view, that be the dressing room, that be the coaches, all of it's important, right? So it's like sometimes I probably was guilty as an agent assessing other teams, and you assess it like in theory without those actual realities that become part of how you build a team.
So he's talking about, and I had mentioned it earlier, that there's consideration given to the point of view of the head coach. There's consideration given to what the captain has to say. They clearly, both of them, they don't want to see people go. And Kent Hughes, I mean, being a general manager in the National Hockey League requires a pretty steel spine to be successful. And Kent Hughes said it was much easier to do that as a player agent, that he was able to objectively evaluate situations much easier, that as a general manager, he finds the pull towards relationship building with his players, with his captain, with his head coach. He feels pulled towards that in creating this family, and it's difficult once you're putting it together to take a part out here, take a part out there, bring in a new part. It's an interesting insight into Kent Hughes, who has relatively speaking, a lot of experience as a player agent, but very little experience as an NHL general manager. And he's struggling somewhat, or at least there's an internal dialogue for himself about this objective evaluation versus relationship building.
Switching gears back once again to the captain, Nick Suzuki. He admitted that obviously coming out of the Four Nations break, the guys playing on the team understood what was at stake with their performance in the first handful of games coming off of that break.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I thought, if we lost a couple games coming out of the break, it was probably going to be a lot different than it is today. So, that's a testament to the group that we had. We knew what we had to do to keep the group together, and everyone wanted that. So, we've done a good job, and we just got to keep that going, and can't just be satisfied with keeping the guys here. We got to win games and put ourselves in a good spot to make the playoffs.
Interesting, very interesting. The Canadiens had lost 8 of 9 going into the break. It was thought that the plan was in place. Nick Suzuki said, had we lost another game or two coming out of the break, that would have kind of reinforced the position for his general manager to make changes. Again, a very small window of success may have changed the Montreal Canadiens deadline approach.
So a few moments ago, I talked about, expiring contracts. First and foremost, as something that, the business side of hockey GMs absolutely have to take into consideration when approaching the trade deadline. And Kent Hughes had plenty of those to choose from in terms of potentially dealing some upcoming unrestricted free agents. In fact, there were 5 of them available, Jake Evans being one of them. And he took a very team-friendly contract extension, which will help the Canadiens moving forward. And we have said multiple times on this program, we're big fans of Jake Evans' game. And so if they found a way to keep him around without and got him to come down in his price, then great. But that also left Yoel Armia, David Savard, Christian Dvorak, and Michael Pezzetta, all pending UFAs this coming summer. And I mean, I think this is the 3rd year in a row that I thought for sure, yes, David Savard needs to be traded. He still hasn't been traded. There were plenty of unrestricted free agents to choose from on selling.
Prices were high, but I think you listed them in the 5 pending free agents in order of declining value, declining returns. And so, yes, Jake Evans was the most valuable of all. And it was said that the asking price for Evans and Armia in a package deal was a first-round pick. There's lots of teams interested, as we told you last week, the Jets, the Leafs, the Oilers, the Devils, and the Wild. But it was, Evans with the most value of all, and he signed that team-friendly deal. Fascinating that Sportsnet reported that Hughes received offers for Yoel Armia, and that it was a second-round pick that was offered for Yoel Armia at the trade deadline.
You take that all day, every day.
But Hughes declined on that to keep the group together. That is fascinating to me. Really fascinating.
I just don't. If that reporting is true, I don't. Even despite what Kent Hughes had to say in his press conference, I do not understand the decision to not take a second-round draft pick for Yoel Armia. Just don't understand that.
Yep.
Let's hear from Jake Evans, who talks about the fact that he and I think basically the team, like they're at a place that they're ready to take the next step. This is what they in the locker room are feeling.
Everyone here is really happy. Those the guys that were in those rumors, big parts of the team and great teammates and great people. So I think it sends a message that we're we're ready to take that next step and push for the playoffs.
So of those pending free agents, they all spoke rather highly and all seem very happy with the decision. And now that decision's been made that they'll stay together, they're all ready to take the next step in Jake Evans's words.
And Yoel Armia, obviously, we're going to hear from him in a second. That how happy he is to stay in Montreal. Just to continue, why is my opinion that if Hughes was really offered a second rounder for Yoel Armia, don't forget this is a guy who spent a vast majority of his season last year in the AHL, and he went down there, improved things, took on his role as a mentor very seriously, came back this year very strongly, and has turned himself into something that was reportedly getting offers of a second round draft pick. Wow. But good for Yoel Armia. He says he's very happy to get to stay in Montreal.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I love the team, love my teammates. I love to be here. I play hockey in Montreal, so obviously it's a good thing for me.
Loves his teammates, loves playing in Montreal, and is glad to be here. The other part of that is of those 5, Jake Evans has a contract extension. None of the others do. So the happiness they're feeling is about the next 20 games for now of playing in Montreal.
It's just, it's mind-boggling. Christian Dvorak, he was right in there as well. He was also asked about, just like Nick Suzuki commented on whether or not strategies and the approach to the trade deadline possibly changed in terms of them winning coming out of the break. Christian Dvorak had some comments about that as well.
Yeah, it's kind of whatever happens. I'm not sure what would happen if we don't go on that 5-game winning streak. So it's probably something you should ask Kent. But no, I'm happy. We went on this nice run here, and happy I got a chance to, like I said, make the playoffs with the Canadiens.
So interesting that he ties the strategy on trade deadline day to keep all the unrestricted free agents to that 5-game winning streak. But a little more nonchalant about, prior to that, I was feeling whatever happens, happens. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Which leaves Michael Pezzetta. I'm sure there was an interest in him. David Savard. There's been a lot of talk about David Savard. And if we go back a year, we know that there was a lot of interest in David Savard. And Kent Hughes had set his price at a first-round pick last trade deadline, received some offers of second-round picks, chose not to go that way. And there was reports that we have to look at David Savard's situation differently. A different lens is required when we view David Savard. And the reason that's given is that Savard wants his kids to grow up in a Francophone environment and be close to their grandparents. I just wonder if the same wouldn't
that be everybody?
Yeah. Is David Savard the only one who has kids? The only one who has family considerations and grandparents and all those kinds of things? Odd. And why couldn't, if the decision was made last year or this year, why couldn't the kids have stayed in that environment and gone to school and got their education in a Francophone environment with David Savard? I would be absolutely floored if David Savard was given a contract extension for next season. I think this is the final 20 games of David Savard in Montreal. If there's any common sense in the world at all, I mean, everyone has seen his play decline considerably this season. And so this season, if he was moved at the trade deadline, it was 20 games of him having an awkward arrangement where he was playing somewhere else and having his kids, in Montreal. I don't remember, in the business world of NHL hockey and the pursuit of a Stanley Cup, these kinds of considerations being made.
We were briefly talking about this before the show, and I said, listen, I understand putting a player's best interest at heart and a player's family's best interest at heart to a certain degree when you are management. However, at some point, there has to be a line in the sand where a business, and this all goes back to the business side of hockey, there has to come a time when a business decision has to be made. And I feel once again that the Canadiens came up short on making this business decision once again with David Savard. And I really hope it's not one of those things that comes in threes, because as you said, he should have been traded last year when he was getting some decent offers. There was enough talk around him this year that I'm sure something could have been done. So let's hope, as you say, if there's any common sense in the universe left, that this will be the last 20 games that we see David Savard dressed in a Montreal Canadiens sweater. And that is no offense personally to David Savard. He's been a great mentor off the ice for the young defensemen and so forth. But the next chapter is here.
It is. And that's another point that people keep bringing up, being a great mentor. How long do you keep the training wheels on
right.
for an Arbor Xhekaj? At some point, he's got to stand up on his own without using a spot in the lineup to support him.
That's right. So where does all of this leave the Canadiens now for the remainder of the season and heading into the off season? Well, let's first talk about retention slots. They still have one available because he did not get involved in, and there were some multi-team trades where we saw, was it Detroit taking on some salary and getting no player out of the deal, just taking on some contract. And so he did not use that third retention slot. Now they have used two for Petrie and Jake Allen, but Rick, that means that there is one retention slot still available to Hughes this summer.
Well, those retention slots will reset on July 1st. So he'll have all three available for the summer until between now and let's say draft day. If there's a draft day trade, there is a third slot available, and that's third slot for sure would have, if a trade was made, whether it was a Savard, whether it was an Armia. Pretty sure that Kent Hughes would have had to use that third slot. He didn't. It's now available for draft day trade.
The other thing that, and we talked about this a little bit last week as well, the other thing that's interesting is no, Kent Hughes did not make any moves in terms of buying or selling in terms of the NHL roster, but he also did not make any minor league deals to help the Rocket in their playoff push. Now, that's not to say that could not still happen, because just as a reminder, we mentioned this last week, the AHL trade deadline goes a week after the NHL trade deadline. So the AHL trade deadline doesn't come until 3:00 this coming Friday, next Friday. So there is still time for him to make AHL level deals, but the fact that he did not put anything together with anyone who's on an NHL contract or a two-way NHL contract, that type of thing, was very interesting.
Not necessarily a worry for the playoffs, because the Rocket are humming along now. They're going to get players back. But between now and the end of the season for the Canadiens, and let's assume for now that they don't make the playoffs, they're going to get back. They're going to get back some players, the Rocket, that is, to help them in the playoffs. But they'll be occupied for the playoff push. So you wondered if Hughes might do something, and as you said, still an opportunity to do that. You mention and remind people every year about the paper transactions, and why don't you just explain them once again and who was involved?
So paper transactions, the rule is that in order for any player to be eligible to participate in the AHL's Calder Cup playoffs with their team, they must be on the AHL roster by 3:00 p.m. on the day of the NHL trade deadline. And so that means any players who are playing on the NHL roster, in this instance for the Montreal Canadiens, who management would like to make sure will be able to participate in the Laval Rockets playoffs come Calder Cup playoff season, they would need to send them down to Laval prior to 3:00 on trade deadline day so that those players are on the roster for the AHL team at that time, and thus making them eligible to participate in the playoffs. They call it a paper transaction because they don't actually send them down. They just, on paper, send them to the AHL and then immediately recall them again. And so 2 paper transactions took place for the Canadiens this year, and that was Owen Beck and Jakub Dobeš.
Now, there's the other restriction, and that is that between the trade deadline and the end of the season, NHL teams are limited to 4 recalls from the AHL. So that means that Owen Beck and Jakub Dobeš were sent down prior to the trade deadline and then immediately recalled after the trade deadline. So they've used 2 already of their 4 recalls. 2 recalls from the AHL remain. Interestingly enough, Emil Heineman was not included, so he won't be eligible for the playoffs. But there are 2 call-up spots remaining, maybe to give an end-of-season audition to a Logan Mailloux or a David Reinbacher or someone else.
Jared Davidson.
Jared Davidson would be interesting as well. So we'll keep an eye on that. But all of that, those little regulations were involved with the trade deadline day as well.
And those 4 recalls that the Canadiens are permitted are exclusive of emergency recalls for injuries.
Yeah.
Emergency recalls for injuries do not count against the 4 that they're permitted to have
They're
after
given
the
an
trade
exemption.
deadline. That's
Yeah.
right. The one other thing that I should mention in terms of the Rocket and help they might get for the playoff push is something that Kent Hughes did mention in his press conference, and that is when his season is over in the Swedish Hockey League, Oliver Kapanen will likely come over and play for the Laval Rocket in their playoff push, which is very exciting.
Huge.
First of all, very big piece for him to come in, and that was great to hear from Kent Hughes that that's likely going to happen. So what else? Where else does this leave the Canadiens? Well, they still need a replacement for Kirby Dach because their second line center is done for the rest of the season, and who knows? He's going to be a gigantic question mark in terms of what Kent Hughes decides to do this summer when it comes to Kirby Dach.
And Kirby Dach, as we've discussed, may not be the second line center of the future, maybe a winger, and whether he's in the middle 6 somewhere. So there seems to be a need for a second line center. Is it Michael Hage already in the organization, or do they have to look elsewhere? Some fans were looking at, we talked about it before, Dylan Cousins. But, Kent Hughes said because of the prices, and the limited availability, that a trade is more likely at the draft or in the summer.
It's like over the last, since Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton have taken over their tenure over the last 3 or 4 years, it's almost like we've gotten a little bit used to being underwhelmed at the trade deadline for the most part, which I think made it all the more. It's just this kind of unsettling feeling this wasn't just underwhelming. This was just nothing, absolute zero. And so you think, okay, well, have they done it? Well, there have been some moves, right? I mean, let's just take a quick reminder of the 3 trade deadlines prior to this one that Kent Hughes has been at the helm for, and just remind our listeners and viewers that yes, there were things that happened every year, which makes it such a stark contrast to this one.
In 2022, and understand Kent Hughes had just been on the job for a couple months, the 2022 trade deadline That was a big one. He made some big moves, cleaned house, and brought in some significant pieces, or at least what he thought were going to be significant pieces. The 2022 deadline saw Arturi Lehkonen shipped to Colorado, and good for Lehkonen. He was able to parlay a Stanley Cup out of that. The return was Justin Barron, who was supposed to be one of, maybe the number one right-handed right shot defenseman. In that trade deadline, Brett Kulak was sent for a second round pick that became Lane Hudson. Ben Sherratt was sent for a first round pick that partly became Alex Newhook. And then Tyler Toffoli, a first round pick, Philippe Machar, Emil Heineman, Evgeny Volokin. That was a pretty good haul there. And so I think for Canadiens fans,
that was exciting.
It was incredible, absolutely incredible what Kent Hughes did. And I think that Kent Hughes is kind of living off the fumes of that particular trade deadline, because it got a little bit sparse after that. 2023, Nate Schnarr for Frederick Allard. Remember that? Nick Bonino, who never actually came. It was just kind of a third-party thing. Denis Gurianov for Dadonov. The real missed opportunity there was Josh Anderson. His Hughes's phone was ringing off the hook for Josh Anderson, and wouldn't he like to have some of the trades that he was offered back then all over again. 2024 is a big deal in that Sean Monahan and Winnipeg's first round pick, that was the second first round pick that he had gotten for Sean Monahan. Jake Allen solved the 3 goalie rotation, a third round pick. Jan Mysak for Jakob Perreault. All right. The big miss there was not moving David Savard for a second round pick. The offers he got were a second round pick. He was looking for a first round pick, decided to hang on to David Savard, and his value dropped considerably. And then this past trade deadline, nothing. So not a lot significant in the past 3 trade deadlines. And I think, you said it, the mistake was that didn't take advantage of that second round pick that was offered for Yoel Armia. So when you think about, you mentioned it, that Brad Marchand was acquired for a second round pick. Lane Hudson was picked up with a second round pick. And the Canadiens have given up or left 2 second round picks in the past 2 trade deadlines on the table, and chosen not to take advantage of the offers that were there. Definitely.
And one could argue as to whether or not it was a mistake to trade Jake Allen when he did. We saw that, Caden Primo being part of the tandem at the beginning of the season was once again not the right decision. Whereas you could have kept Jake Allen perhaps as a mentor for Sam Montembeault for some stability in net, and just let Caden Primo continue to work with Jakub Dobeš down in Laval, and then Dobeš would have been ready for his rise to the NHL as he is currently doing now.
And like Kovacevic, Jake Allen's had a very solid season in New Jersey.
So that's kind of what has happened, maybe why it's happened, and what it sets up now for the future. But the big question, I think a lot of fans, there are some fans that are fine with this. As you could see on social media, there were plenty that have been definitely lulled into the, well, we don't want just a bunch of, we don't, we're done getting draft picks and we don't need more draft picks and we've got lots of draft picks and that kind of thing. But I think there's plenty who are also saying, why did Kent Hughes do nothing? And Could it be, we've asked this question a number of times. When it was announced that they were going to rebuild this team, the question that we posed to all of our listeners at the time was, can you be patient, Habs fans? Can you really be patient? And perhaps we are starting to see that the digging deep into the trench of patience is starting to wear a bit thin.
I call it rebuild fatigue. And, the Canadiens fans have not traditionally had much patience for the length of time that a rebuild has taken. And we heard, everybody, they talk about, yes, we can be patient. But I think that we heard a bit of it at the beginning of the season that from fans that this has got to be the season that Canadiens make the playoffs. So we heard it from the organization saying they have to be in the mix and playing meaningful games in April. And so I think that we're seeing that patience has run out. Fan patience has run out. We heard from the players, particularly Nick Suzuki, that his patience has run out, seeing people leave. Head coach hasn't had much patience for not winning. The ownership as well. Jeff Molson has said, he's the only one in his family that doesn't have a Stanley Cup, and he wants to see a full building for the playoffs. So I think that's why, it's so difficult to stick to a rebuild plan, that there is that fatigue, there is that lack of patience. And Kent Hughes talked about it in his presser, that there is a downside to being in the mix, and that is a much weaker draft position, particularly when there are still big holes. And you can look at the Canadiens having a pretty good, a very good prospect pool. They certainly have that, but lacking good depth, as many have said, but lacking elite players in their playoff pool. And you look at some of the teams and the way they bulked up at the trade deadline and realize, as Kent Hughes said, they're still a long, long away from a Stanley Cup.
That they are. And now we have to sit back, see what this team that he has left intact can do in the last 20 games of the season, if it amounts to anything. And then what will happen in the offseason and at this year's draft. Which all leads us to the Canadiens Connection question of the week. Here is what we want to hear from all of you. Do you agree with Kent Hughes' decision to stand pat at the trade deadline? Or should he have made a move? And I think this is going to be a polarizing question. I think we're going to get plenty of answers at both ends of this spectrum for a variety of reasons, but we won't be able to read out your answer unless you send it in to us. Do you agree with Kent Hughes' decision to stand pat at the trade deadline, or should he have made a move? Send us a text on the Rocket Sports text line. That's 5853-ROCKET. Leave a comment on our YouTube channel. You can find that at InsideTheCanadiens.com, or send us a message or a reply on social media at Habs Connection on X, Facebook, and Instagram. And we will take the best answers and read them to everyone next week on the show. And with that, we are going to take our final break on the Canadiens Connection podcast. Up next, we're going to hear from all of you and your best replies to last week's Canadiens Connection question of the week. So stay with us for that. You're listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio.
It might not feel like it, but spring is right around the corner. Do you know how you can tell? Golfers are hitting the links, and we have some tournaments to talk about. And if you want to do more than just talk, well, put your money where your mouth is. Get in on all the tee to green action with DraftKings Sportsbook. From Thursday's opening round through the closing round on Sunday, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with tournament props, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Now, if you've never bet on golf before, it's easier than you think. Just pick something simple like a golfer to win the tourney and make your pick. It's just that easy. And here's something special for first-timers. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. New customers only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
And welcome back to episode 338 of the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio. Don't forget, if you haven't done so already, won't you hit the subscribe button? We definitely want to make sure that you never miss an episode. The Canadiens Connection podcast hits your favorite podcast platforms every Saturday afternoon. But if you prefer to watch the podcast on YouTube, it comes out every Monday on our YouTube channel. So be sure you subscribe over there as well. InsideTheCanadiens.com is where you'll find our YouTube channel. Tap subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you will automatically get notified when we release a new video. And of course, make sure if you are able to, if you're listening on a platform that allows you to, if you could leave us a review. We appreciate those 5-star reviews. Really helps us push the podcast out to more Habs fans around the world. And if you're so inclined, we would always be grateful for you to share this episode. Just tap that share button and share this episode with your social media followers. Now, of course, this segment is all about you and what you have to say about the Montreal Canadiens. And so don't forget to let us know what you feel about Kent Hughes' decision to stand pat at the trade deadline. Do you agree with it, or should he have made a move this week? We want to hear from you in regards to that question. We've told you how to reach out to us. Last week we asked you what is your dream trade scenario for the Canadiens before the deadline? So we had a lot of responses. We had some pretty well thought out responses as to if many of you had your dream trade scenario play out, how that would look. And Rick, I'll let you start.
We're going to start with our Substack. Yes, we're on Substack. Look for Rocket Sports. Be sure to subscribe, and you'll get our content, our written content, in your email. And this one comes from our good friend Dino in the Ottawa-Gatineau area. And I think he's skipping right ahead to this week's question because he says, "Hi, Rick. Holy smoke. The hockey gods have spoken. Stand pat, Kent Hughes and Associates, 1 point back with 20 games to go. We cannot break it up." Talking about the team, of course. "Acknowledge, entrust, and reward the players for getting us close. A final push for Lord Stanley." Holy moly. Even Dvorak is starting to look like a hockey player now. Rick, my friend, remember back to 2010? Indeed I do. We sneak in, we match up against the top seed in the land. Capitals, Washington Capitals. Holy smoke, is it possible again? You never know unless you try, and we surely will not never know. P.S. What would Sammy have done? Of course, he's talking about the great Sam Pollock, in my opinion, the greatest general manager who's ever lived in the National Hockey League, who created all those Montreal Canadiens dynasties. And I think Sammy was pretty ruthless about the way he made decisions.
Yes.
And they usually led to a lot of success. Dino goes on to say, "Cheers, my friend. P.S. Miss your Rocket Sports coverage season long. I check out other stuff out there, but no dice. It's Rocket Sports for me." So thank you, Dino. Always appreciate hearing from you.
Absolutely. Switching over to YouTube, at CenterHeist7948 was back with another great comment this week. He says, "Again, great show, Amy and Rick. I can't give a dream trade because I'm too much of a realist, LOL. But since we're in the mix, I don't think Evans, Armia, and Savard get traded. Oh, he had his crystal ball out, apparently.
He's dead on there.
I don't think the value in return, second rounders and below, just isn't worth disturbing the chemistry of the group. However, I'd like to see Hughes keep his promise and be a bit of a buyer. Womp womp. And make a move to upgrade the second line with a true second line center. Gee, Center Heist, we would have loved to have seen that too. I'd love to see them go get Dylan Cousins.
We talked about Dylan Cousins in this podcast.
He would be an upgrade. Hughes, make it happen. And that's why I left Dvorak out, only because I think he could be one player in a trade package to make this trade. And I hate to say it, but I just don't see him as part of the high-speed future of the Habs. Not meant as a knock against him. He works hard, just hasn't been what Bergevin thought he was. So I think now we can start trading our draft picks in packages to get players that are relevant that can improve our team. And a second trade would be nice to trade for a Matthew Olivier to add toughness, but there's no way Columbus lets him go.
And he just signed a contract extension this week.
And these two players are both young enough. So we have enough drafted talent that we don't really need to use our upcoming picks. So use them to add packages to improve the team with proven talent that is translated to the NHL. Right now, we're at the stage of adding successful players in the NHL that can help our club start moving forward to progress us into becoming a playoff team in the immediate future to be able to compete. So now we don't need to draft players. We have enough coming up. So let's utilize our draft picks 2025 onward. Again, I know it's wishful thinking. You both are awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very well thought out, and some of that hit the nail right on the head.
Yep.
She26 was back this week on YouTube. She says, nice to know that no matter how the Habs games have been going, they're winning. As far as Slafkovsky and his plan to be like Brady Tkachuk and being able to keep it up right away, no, Rick. Definitely no apology and not a bad question when it's true. Jack Guy getting benched, although not surprised, and never Matheson is classic Marty St. Louis. Matheson should just physically hand any other team the puck. Guy gets more TOI than any other player besides the goalie, and for all his screw-ups, nothing. Then that ridiculously stupid post-game presser where St. Louis said he didn't mean to leave Jack Guy out that long but forgot about him. Freaking forgot him? God, I can't put near enough emphasis on how much I dislike that so-called coach. Congrats to Lane Hudson on his points, and nice to see both Emil Heineman and Owen Beck skating. Sucks for Doc. Another injury, same knee. Yikes. I find the whole Dobesh thing weird. When many people thought Dobesh would be sent to Laval during the Four Nations break, St. Louis said he wasn't going to do that and just wanted to rest him. Then they come back. Dobesh still doesn't play, while Montembeau's in the net 3 games in a row. Marty St. Louis needs to be sent to Laval. Pascal Vincent can give him a crash course on how to be an actual coach. I can't express just how freaking much I love that Laval. Love the way they're playing this year, penalties and all, kicking butt again. Hope they can keep it up. Too bad you didn't play the full audio of Marty St. Louis at practice. He should take his own advice. He yells at the team to wake up, yet, quote, forgot about sitting Jack Guy for the third period. Question of the week, I'm willing to bet you guys already know what I'm going to say. Trade Marty St. Louis for Wah, Vincent, Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, Bugs Bunny, heck, anybody. Thanks, as always, for all you guys do. Never goes unappreciated.
And we couldn't play that audio because we're a family-friendly show and it got censored. This one coming from Habinations, and we talked last week about Slafkovsky committing to playing angry. Habinations said, nope, I don't want Slaffy doing that. Do we have another Latendresse situation going on here? And Guillaume Latendresse, of course, a big player, good skater, very afraid of going anywhere near the boards, didn't like contact whatsoever. I don't think Slafkovsky's like that, but I think the point here is trying to be someone you're not. Mm-hmm. Brady Tkachuk's resting face is mean. Slaffy has a smile. Can't Slaffy just be like Slaffy? Yeah. Because this Brady Tkachuk thing isn't going to last. Players like that get hurt. If they want somebody to check, and why not put Heineman up there and move Slaffy down the second line so the team is more balanced? Heineman's been great, and as that's the fourth line is tremendous. I also think no moves at the trade deadline. Go Habs go from, again, Habinations.
And he was right. No moves. So if you would like the opportunity to have your thoughts read on next week's show. Be sure you get your answer into this week's Canadiens Connection question of the week. Do you agree with Kent Hughes' decision to stand pat at the trade deadline, or should he have made a move? And until then, we've got a few. I hope you have the caffeine ready. Hope you have the coffee pot brewing. Because aside from Saturday night's game, the Western Road Swing is in full effect this week with late starts. Calgary, I guess, is just having an afternoon game because Montreal playing in Calgary on Saturday night. That's a 7:00 Eastern start time, which is just fine with me. Then on Tuesday night, the Canadiens take on the Canucks in Vancouver. That's a 10 p.m. Eastern start time. And then is it Tuesday, Wednesday next week? It is Tuesday, Wednesday. Then Montreal at Seattle on Wednesday. That is a 10:30 p.m. Eastern start time. And all of that on a week where we lose an hour of sleep on Saturday night.
Uh-oh.
That is so unfair. But that means just be sure you're well rested and back here for our next episode of the Canadiens Connection podcast. That'll come next Saturday, March 15th. Be sure you put your leprechaun hats on for that one. It'll be the St. Paddy's Day episode of the show. And we will have lots to talk about, I am sure. We'll see how the Canadiens fare on their Western Road Swing, and looking forward to reading all of your responses and reactions to the Montreal Canadiens in action at the trade deadline. We appreciate you. We look forward to seeing you back here. And thank you once again for listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio.
Click subscribe so you never miss an episode of Canadiens Connection. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Rocket Sports.